A young couple was planning to attend a friend's birthday party, but they never showed up. Police got involved, and what started as a simple missing persons case quickly turned into one of the most disturbing investigations in recent memory. The details were so haunting, even some of the detectives needed therapy, because nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to uncover. Channon Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Texas. When she was 12, her family moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where she settled in with her parents and older brother. Channon was the kind of person who made friends instantly, outgoing, friendly, always ready to help. She fit right into her new school, like she'd always been there. People who knew her said she could connect with just about anyone. That warmth and kindness played a big part in her future plans. Channon wanted to do something meaningful, something that would help others. So after high school, she enrolled at the University of Tennessee to study sociology. Another reason she chose that school was because she wanted to stay close to home. Channon was incredibly close to her family, and staying nearby just felt right. But she was also determined to be independent, so she picked up 2 part-time jobs to support herself. While she was at college, she met a guy named Chris Newsom. They hit it off and started dating. At the time, Channon was 21 and Chris was 23. He worked as a carpenter, and even though he was still young, he had already built a solid reputation for himself around town. On January 6, 2007, Channon and Chris were planning to go to a friend's birthday party. That afternoon, Channon went over to her friend's house, where Chris was supposed to pick her up a bit later. He was running a little behind, so Channon's friend ended up heading to the party without her, and Channon decided to stay at the house and wait for Chris to show up. Before picking up Channon, Chris had dropped off another friend at the same party and headed straight to get his girlfriend. But about an hour later, people at the party started to worry. Channon was only about a 10-minute drive away, but neither she nor Chris had arrived. It just didn't make sense. At first, their friends figured maybe their plans had changed, but something about that didn't sit right. It wasn't like them to just skip out on a close friend's birthday without saying anything. After waiting a while longer, they tried calling both of them, but neither one answered. By the time midnight rolled around, their concern had reached its peak. So a few of them decided to drive over to the apartment complex where Channon had been waiting. When they got to the parking lot, they saw Chris's truck. But Channon's car, the one she had driven earlier, was nowhere to be found. So their friends assumed the couple had just decided to skip the party without telling anyone and headed back to celebrate. A bit earlier, Channon had called her mom and said she'd be home later than expected. She and Chris had decided to spend the evening together, maybe grab something to eat and watch a movie. She told her mom she'd be back around 3:30 in the morning. But that time came and went, and Channon never showed up. At first, her mom figured she might have stayed the night at her friend's, or maybe at Chris's place, so she didn't panic right away. But the next morning, she got a call that changed everything. Channon's boss said she hadn't shown up for work. Channon's mom got in touch with Chris's parents and found out that he hadn't come home the night before either. Neither of them were answering their phones, and now both families were seriously worried. Their friends couldn't reach them either. The whole thing felt off. Sure, Channon and Chris were adults, but they always kept in touch with their parents. They had never just disappeared overnight without saying anything. and Channon took her job seriously. There was no way she'd miss a shift without a good reason. Their families started calling every hospital in the area, but no one matching their descriptions had been admitted anywhere. So they turned to the police for help. But the local department refused to open a case, saying that since both Channon and Chris were adults, the families would have to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. But Channon's family wasn't just going to sit around and wait. Her parents reached out to her phone company, hoping that they could help. And surprisingly, they agreed to trace her phone. They said that during the night, Channon had checked her voicemail 3 times, and that was the last time her phone showed any activity before it turned off. The last signal had pinged off a cell tower near North Cherry Street. That only made her parents more anxious. Knoxville was generally a safe city, but that particular area was known for high crime. It didn't make any sense. Why would Channon be there? Determined to find answers, her family started searching the neighborhood themselves. After hours of driving around, they finally spotted her car. It was parked just a couple of blocks away from where her phone had last pinged. As soon as Channon's family got to the car, they knew something was wrong. All of her belongings were missing. Photos, her phone charger, everything she normally kept with her. The interior of the car was dirty, which was totally unlike her. Channon always kept her car spotless. Even more unsettling, the driver's seat had been pushed all the way back, suggesting someone much taller had been behind the wheel. Clearly, Channon hadn't been the one driving. After this unsettling discovery, her parents called the police again, and this time, officers finally took action. When they arrived at the scene, they noticed something deeply disturbing. The car's interior and door handles had been wiped down, like someone was trying to erase fingerprints. And there was one more thing that didn't sit right: a crumpled, empty pack of cigarettes inside the car. The problem was, neither Channon nor Chris smoked. All signs pointed to the car possibly being stolen, but investigators still had no clue where Channon or Chris were. Then, while searching the car, they finally found something that gave them a real lead: an envelope wedged between the seats. It had the address of a house located right there in the same neighborhood. Even more telling, forensics found a fingerprint on the envelope, and it didn't take long to get a match. The print belonged to a man named LaMarcus Davidson, a convicted felon with a long rap sheet. And as it turned out, he lived at the very address written on the envelope. Detectives headed straight to the house, but no one was there. Still, they had reason to believe Channon and Chris might be in immediate danger, and that gave them legal grounds to enter without a warrant. The inside of the house was a mess, but police immediately spotted Channon's purse, her shoes, and a few other personal items. They also found Chris's baseball cap and his driver's license. But the most horrifying discovery was waiting for them in the kitchen. When one of the officers lifted the lid of the trash can, he found something wrapped in a piece of cloth. Underneath, it was a human body. It was Channon. The case was immediately reclassified as a homicide investigation. Her body was sent to the medical examiner, and detectives were now focused on 2 urgent questions. Where was Chris, and where was LaMarcus Davidson? And they didn't have to wait long for one of those answers. Right after Channon's body was found, police got word from another department. Nearly 2 days earlier, a railroad employee had discovered the body of an unidentified man near the train tracks. At the time, no one had been able to identify him. But now, detectives suspected it might be Chris, and soon a DNA test confirmed their worst fears. The examination of Channon and Chris's bodies revealed a truly horrifying picture. They both had numerous injuries, cuts, bruises, and signs of abuse. It was also clear that they both had been assaulted. Chris died from multiple gunshot wounds, while Channon's cause of death was determined to be suffocation. Forensic experts found biological evidence on Channon's body that matched LaMarcus Davidson. His fingerprints were also discovered on the trash bags used to wrap her remains. And if that wasn't enough, investigators also found spent shell casings inside Davidson's house. Those casings matched the bullets that were recovered from Chris's body. With all of this evidence, police had no doubt that LaMarcus was directly involved in the murders, so they focused all their efforts on finding him. Detectives pulled his cell phone records and discovered that over the past couple of days, LaMarcus had been in frequent contact with a man named Eric. It didn't take long for police to track Eric down. At first, he claimed he didn't know where LaMarcus was. But as soon as investigators explained what LaMarcus was suspected of, and that Eric himself could be charged as an accomplice, he quickly changed his mind and gave up the address. According to Eric, LaMarcus had been hiding out in an empty house that was up for sale. He also admitted that on the very same day Channon and Chris disappeared, they both had robbed it. Police headed to the house, and sure enough, they found LaMarcus there. He was surrounded by trash and empty food containers, and he had a gun with him. But one detail stood out even more. He was wearing Chris's sneakers. Officers took him in for questioning, and from the very beginning, he denied any involvement. Then he started changing his story again and again. In total, LaMarcus gave investigators 5 completely different versions of what happened, each one contradicting the last. At first, he claimed he had no idea what anyone was talking about. Then he said Channon and Chris had been kidnapped by someone else, and he had nothing to do with it. Later, he told detectives he just used the victim's car to drive around and sell drugs. In the end, LaMarcus never confessed, but he did give police a few useful pieces of information. Based on what he said, it was becoming clear that more than one person might have been involved in the murders, and detectives agreed that theory made the most sense. According to LaMarcus, the real killers were his half-brother, Latalis, and their mutual friend, George. Detectives quickly tracked both men down and brought them in for questioning, along with Eric, who was now also being treated as an accomplice. None of them were in a hurry to confess, but during the interrogations, police uncovered something interesting. They concluded that all 4 men had likely played some role in the crime, and they weren't alone. There was a 5th person involved, an 18-year-old woman named Vanessa. Detectives located her and took her into custody as well. With all 5 suspects now under arrest, the questioning continued. Eventually, they all started turning on each other, pointing fingers and telling stories that shifted the blame away from themselves. But even with their conflicting accounts, the growing pile of evidence helped detectives piece together a picture of what really happened that night. Based on everything investigators gathered, LaMarcus seemed to be the ringleader of the group. He was mainly involved in selling drugs, and that night, he planned to steal a car to use for deliveries. He brought along 3 accomplices plus Vanessa, and they went out looking for the right vehicle. As they were driving through a residential complex, the same one where Channon was waiting, they spotted her car. She was sitting inside, and Chris was standing next to it. That's when they decided not just to steal the vehicle, but to abduct the couple as well. They forced Channon and Chris into the car at gunpoint and drove them to LaMarcus's house. According to DNA evidence, both LaMarcus and Latalis sexually assaulted the victims, and the abuse went on for hours. On top of that, they subjected the couple to other forms of torture and humiliation. By early morning, the attackers led Chris out of the house and took him to the railroad tracks, where they shot him multiple times and left his body there. Then they returned to the house and continued tormenting Channon. She remained alive for nearly 2 full days. During that time, her friends and family had already started searching for her, though her car hadn't been found yet. Eventually, they killed her too. Her body was stuffed into a trash can and left inside the house. Investigators also learned that LaMarcus didn't just steal Chris's sneakers. He also took his phone and some of Channon's personal items, which he later gave to his girlfriend as gifts. As for Vanessa, she insisted that she was a victim too, that she had been at the house against her will. But police found a diary in her home that completely contradicted her story. In it, Vanessa described the day as a wild adventure and wrote that she genuinely enjoyed the experience. In the end, all of the suspects were hit with long lists of charges, and the prosecution began preparing for trial. It took more than 2 years to get everything ready, and during that time, the defense attorneys managed to have the trial moved to a different county. The reason was simple. The case had caused a massive public outcry in Knoxville. People were horrified by what had been done to this young couple, and the defense argued there was no way their clients could get a fair trial in that city. Eventually, the court agreed, and the venue was changed. The first to go on trial was Eric. Throughout the investigation, police were never able to find solid proof that he had directly taken part in the murders, but they did uncover enough evidence to show that he knew what was going on. In the end, he received the maximum sentence for the charges against him: 18 years in prison. Next came the trials of LaMarcus, Lulvis, and George. In a desperate attempt to defend them, their attorney claimed that Channon and Chris had willingly participated in the horrific abuse they were subjected to. The jury, of course, didn't buy that ridiculous story for a second, and all 3 men were found guilty. LaMarcus was sentenced to death, while Lulvis and George received life in prison. Vanessa's case was a bit more complicated. At first, she'd been granted immunity in exchange for testifying against the others. But the court later ruled that her immunity only applied to the carjacking charges, not to the charges related to the murder and sexual assault. So Vanessa did end up facing trial, and eventually she was convicted and sentenced to 53 years in prison. In the end, all those responsible were brought to justice. But not long after the verdicts were handed down, the case took a surprising turn. In 2011, the judge who had presided over all 5 trials resigned amidst the scandal. It came to light that he had been having an affair with a court employee and had also been buying illegal drugs from criminals. Because of this, a higher court decided to review several of the sentences he had issued, including those of LaMarcus, Vanessa, George, and Lulvis. The news sparked outrage, and understandably so. In the end, prosecutors were able to successfully challenge the decisions involving LaMarcus and Lulvis, meaning their original sentences stood. But the other 2, Vanessa and George, were granted new trials. Vanessa was once again found guilty of the same charges, But this time, she received a reduced sentence of 35 years instead of 53. George also got a lighter sentence, which made him eligible for parole after serving 51 years. Still, the retrials of Vanessa and George ended up having consequences in the other direction too. During those new proceedings, the prosecution gathered a significant amount of new evidence that suggested Eric had, in fact, taken an active part in the abuse and murders. In 2019, he was hit with new charges. This time, he was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 90 years. Considering that his original sentence was just 18 years, this new ruling all but erased any chance he had of ever being released. Vanessa, on the other hand, became eligible for parole after serving just 7 years. But so far, all of her requests have been denied, and she remains behind bars. In the end, despite all the setbacks, those responsible for the murders of Channon and Chris were held accountable and received serious prison time, though many still believe every one of them deserved the death penalty. This crime didn't just shake Knoxville, it sent shockwaves across the entire country. People struggled to comprehend how anyone could be capable of something so cruel and inhuman. The house where it all happened was eventually bought by a local company. It was torn down, and in its place, a memorial was built to honor Channon and Chris. The University of Tennessee also established scholarships in their names, ones that are still active today. And finally, it's worth noting that LaMarcus's death sentence has yet to be carried out. Nearly 20 years after the murders, he's still sitting on death row. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.